Amat merat ike tesolderat ikmerut.
Hey all, Dave here again. I recently made a video answering Enlightio's 56 questions to ask an atheist post. For those that didn't watch the previous video, Enlightio is a site that has lots of various lists dedicated to questions to ask various groups of people. This one focuses on atheists in particular. The questions, as they are framed, have a very different feel to many of the questions for atheist videos we generally see from Christians and Muslims. So they feel a little more interesting to answer. In the previous video, I answered questions 1 to 10. In this one, I'll be answering questions 11 to 20. If you're interested in seeing the previous video in this series, the link will be included in the description for this one. Anyway, on with the video. Question 11. Do you think religion is harmful to society? This is a simple question to ask, but a lot harder to answer. The problem with it is that it treats all of religion as if it's some kind of monolith, where all variations of religion are created equal. In reality, though, not all religions are created equal. Even with particular religions, not all interpretations are equal, and not all followers are equal. There is a wealth of difference between an Islamic fundamentalist and the average Muslim just trying to live their lives, just as there is a wealth of difference between someone like Randall Rouser and someone like Matt Powell, or a Buddhist and a Christian, and even a Christian and a follower of Judaism, which means that it's impossible to give just a direct yes or no answer to this question, at least for me anyway. There are most definitely elements of religion that are harmful to society, especially if we consider it in the sense of interpretation. There are those that believe that all must convert to a particular religion, or that society should be run according to a particular religion. Take Islamic fundamentalism or Christian nationalism as an example. This is something I consider to be harmful to society as a whole. The kind of thinking promoted is harmful to secularism. Many of those that think in this way are also anti-science to a certain degree, which is also harmful to society. They also discriminate against homosexuals and transgenders and other religions and pretty much anyone that is not in their in-group. All of these things are harmful to society. There is much that could be said about how religion can be harmful to society, especially when looking at individual believers or groups of believers. However, there are lots of positives that come from religion. It can give people community and hope and purpose and a sense of charity and morality. It also answers some of the tough questions that many of us have when it comes to living our lives. We can see the positive effects that religion has in the form of many believers. The Sikhs that can be found at many disasters feeding people, or the Christians helping the homeless, or the Buddhists promoting charity and kindness. Within all religions, we can find good people doing various things. Of course, there will be many atheists at the moment arguing that we don't need religion for these things, or bringing up the Steven Weinberg quote about how religion is needed for good people to do evil things. Let's grant both of those things as true for the sake of argument. Neither of those things do anything to dispute what I just said, though. Religion is something that causes good and causes harm, just like any other ideology or any other group of people that follows a particular ideology. It is a large subject and one that needs to be approached with nuance if we want to think critically about it. Question 12. What do atheists think about religious art and architecture? As with anything, I can only really give my opinion on it and not speak for all atheists. But that said, I think there is plenty of religious art and architecture that I find great and beautiful. Religion has been the inspiration for a lot of great art, and that includes music too. Some of the music that comes out of American churches is fantastic.
Who do you call? Wonderful Counselor. Oh, glory, hallelujah.
Question 13. Have you ever been discriminated against because you're an atheist? The answer to this question would probably be very different if I lived in a country like the US or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia. Thankfully, though, I live in the UK and life is very different here. Atheism is something that is completely normalized, and almost everyone I know is an atheist. Those that aren't atheists adopt a very accepting attitude. In the 80s in the UK it was slightly different, and being an atheist wasn't something that was as widespread. However, I've never been discriminated against in any way that made my life more difficult or caused me any problems. Others' experiences may vary though. Question 14. Are there any famous or well-known atheists that I should know about? It depends on what you mean by should know about, I guess. If you're looking for people to help understand arguments for atheism, then I'd highly recommend Nietzsche, Hume, Stephen Law, and Graham Oppy. Reading their work will give a pretty good insight into atheism. There are also lots of pop atheism figures out there as well that are very vocal about atheism, and they aren't too hard to find, like Matt Dillahunty or Ron Raw. Question 15. Do you believe that humans are inherently good or bad? No, I don't believe that humans are either of those things. I think that we are socially constructed beings for the most part, and our experiences define who we are. There is a certain amount of biology and psychology involved, but I don't think that these things make us good or bad by default. Our upbringing, our experiences, who we are surrounded by, and the culture we're brought up in, all of these things contribute to who we are. And we're judged good or bad based on the social construction of other cultures and our own culture and other people. Question 16. How do you define morality and what role does it play in your life? Okay, this is a great question, and unfortunately it's a huge question. Probably too big of a question for a video like this because these are supposed to be short and snappy answers, but I define morality as principles of right and wrong. It's a pretty simple definition. This includes ideas about how we ought to act, what it means to be a good person, things like virtue, and more. It is a complicated subject when you delve into it properly. The role that it plays in my life is that I try to live my life according to what I think it means to be a good person. I try to use it to guide how I treat others and how I make my way through the world. Question 17. Do you think atheists can be moral people? Of course I do. I'm an atheist and I see myself as a moral person. Most people who know me consider me to be a moral person as well. I think when it comes to being a moral person, if most Christians or believers weren't told someone was an atheist, they wouldn't be able to tell they were an atheist just from their behavior alone. At least not from their moral behavior anyway. Question 18. Do you think religion is harmful or helpful? This is sort of similar to question 11, and my answer to it is roughly similar. There are cases where religion is most certainly helpful. It can give people purpose, community, meaning, increase their happiness, answer some important questions, and more. However, there are also certainly cases where religion is harmful. It can create bigotry, insularity, science denial, and more. Of course, these things can be found among other communities of people too, but the question here asks about religion in particular. Question 19. What do you think is the meaning and purpose of life, if any? I don't think there is any real inherent meaning or purpose to life. Life simply is. There is something inherently beautiful in that, though, in that this means that we are free to create our own meaning and our own purpose. And that's where I think the meaning and purpose of life comes from. There are things that limit us, like income, social structures, biology, psychology, etc. But we are free to create our own meaning within those limits. We do not have to see ourselves as inherently wicked or inherently broken, needing to seek the acceptance and approval of some god and that kind of thing. Though those who desire that are free to make that their meaning and purpose. Of course, this also has its downfalls, as finding meaning and purpose in a world with none is much harder than in a world where purpose and meaning is handed down to us from a creator. However, accepting and embracing the idea that we must create our own purpose can empower us. Question 20. How do you deal with doubt or moments when you question your beliefs? Okay, that's another really interesting question. One of the reasons I decided to study philosophy, beyond the fact that I find much of it interesting, was a way to help me question my beliefs and to help me deal with my doubts. When it comes to dealing with doubts and questions, I generally do my best to throw myself into looking into the various outlooks and opinions on the subject. I've been an atheist my whole life, but that doesn't mean I haven't had doubts about whether God exists. I've looked at arguments for and against God, various religions, various philosophers, and more. Answers usually point me back towards atheism, but I will generally learn something new along the way, and have often changed my mind on various topics. So I guess the best answer I can give here is study, and discussion with others is how I deal with doubts and questions about my beliefs. Which brings us to the end of the second part in this series, with questions 11 to 20 answered. I've tried to keep them all as brief as possible, even though a few of them do require much bigger answers. A couple of the questions were very similar to each other, but most of the questions were pretty reasonable. Some of them very common questions, and questions that I have been asked throughout my lifetime by believers. But they're always worth revisiting and rethinking about, as sometimes personal growth and age can often lead us to think about these questions in a different way. There are a few questions in this list that I will probably revisit at some point in the future, those that deserve much bigger and much more expanded answers. I'll probably give them each individual episodes, or perhaps collect them a couple in each episode and really go in depth into them. Anyway, that's all for this one. I'll catch you again soon, hopefully. Take care, and I hope life treats you well until then. Bye!